if I give you everything, then I'm your wizard. I'm your Gandalf, your Merlin. But what makes an athlete great is when they go, what made Dick Fosbury great in the high jump? Well, he thought for himself, to the point that his coach at Oregon State, Frank Morris, did everything he could to stop Fosbury from jumping that way. And then later, of course, sold VHSs on how he coached him up, which I still think is hilarious.
That was Dan John, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Today's podcast is sponsored by Gym Studio. Gym Studio is a frictionless gym and studio management software. It can effortlessly manage memberships, schedule classes, track attendance, and even automate billing. To check out what Gym Studio can do for you, head to gymstudio.com and set up your free 14-day trial in less than 5 minutes. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, and thanks for tuning in. I'm excited to have Dan John back on the show. Dan is a legendary strength coach, track coach, an author, and an educator to many thousands of individuals seeking better strength and levels of human performance. On the show today, Dan will talk about navigating the journey of training. He'll talk about the peaks and valleys of performance, putting progression in perspective, looking at expectations and its role in one's competitive and maximal ability. He'll talk about autonomy and self-learning, and ultimately gives us a greater, broader perspective on the things that really matter in a performance training program. It's always great talking to Dan. Loved this episode, and I'm excited to get it going. Let's get on to episode 429 here with Dan John. Dan, awesome to have you back on the show. Got a ton of questions to ask you. I always have to double check because I've asked you so many things, and it's I know I'll just ask them again. So it took me a little bit to write these up, but I'm excited to talk to you today. So thanks for being on.
Oh, you bet. It's great. I appreciate it. Love your work, as you know, and good luck on this new project. And for those who are listening, sometimes I think when you put together a book, a course, an article, taking something that's just so obvious and apparent on the track, on the field of play, and then taking that concept and putting it into, black on white, letters on a page, just well, and then I guarantee there's been a moment where you said, doesn't everybody know this? Doesn't everybody know that you need recovery as much as, you'll see these workouts and it's well, yeah, when are you going to recover? I had a person complaining about overtraining, and they told me the workouts, and I was well, your workouts are your lack of progress is because of and bless you, you're at work. So let's get started. I'm here for you. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I was just going to say with that, before we pushed record, I was talking about yesterday, I was reading Never Let Go. And it's just interesting too. I know we've had these basic type of conversations where you simplify things down to a very basic thing, and then you get really good at that thing. And one of the things I was reading, this actually wasn't in the question list, but I was just thinking about it, was just 5x5s. And in Never Let Go, you had all these ways you could wave like a 5x5 type setup. And I think it's interesting because I think we're more inclined in the current world to be oh, well, what about this set rep scheme and this set rep scheme and this one and that and this, and it's well, just sit with 5x5 and all the ways you could wave it for a little while. And then you get really good at that. And I just don't think we take the time to sit with a scheme as long as maybe, I don't know, maybe it was that way too 40 years ago, but I would doubt it was as much so perhaps as it is now.
Well, back when I was young, okay, so I'm going to move my screen up. So those are the strength and health magazines from my youth, okay? For those of you listening, I've got, in fact, at one time I had probably double that because people, when they want to get rid of their collection, they send it to me. And I've been trying to, I don't want my poor daughters to have to throw away that much stuff when I die. So I'm trying to wean it down a bit. And the nice thing about strength and health, or say you had subscribed to Ironman, is that you were only exposed to one stupid idea a month. There'd be an article that would be stupid, and you'd all go, "Wow, this is the secret." Ironman had an article years ago about where every hour on the hour you would drink a protein shake, do a set of curls, and do a set of triceps, and at the end of the 10 hours, you would gain an inch on your arms. Well, So my friend Randy Taylor famously tried that. And of course, you can imagine how that worked. 10 protein shakes in one day. It didn't work. It didn't, let's just say the inch on the arm didn't happen. But that was just one time, one dumb idea. He had 30 days, 31 days, 28 days to, press reset and, until the next magazine came out with the next stupid idea, like the one that said that brewers yeast and desiccated liver taken in a 100 to 200 tablets a day were like anabolic steroids. My friend Eric and I tried that. And I got to tell you one thing, we did not want to come close to the squat rack when you were in there because the smells were so bad, so bad. And we did not gain anything except we lost all of our friends. So yeah, one dumb idea a month versus one. I mean, you can go on Instagram right now and come up with 30 dumb ideas. And they're not right, and they're not proven, and they're whims, WHIMS. Yeah. So that's why I feel for the modern athlete. If you don't mind me going on one more thing,
Sure.
Joel, you're a high school and collegiate athlete, and you look up to your heroes, and they're all posing for clothing companies or bikini companies. So not only do I have to improve my performance out on the field, the track, but I also have to look really good, and I have to have high cheekbones and my hair a certain way. I don't know how you got. I mean, I was just at some big, dumb, ugly Utah State discus thrower, and I was happy as a clam. Didn't have to worry about makeup or zits or hair. I just threw, and it's just not true anymore.
Yeah. It's an interesting ecosphere we live in. Like, yeah, there's the information overload, like you said, and then there's also the expectation overload. Like, and how many things can I be? How many? Or maybe it'd be interesting if there was like a coach's filter on Instagram where it's like, just like the magazine, you get to see one thing a month and you have to sit with it. Because if it's a bad idea, at least you sat with it for a month and found out that was the thing that was a bad idea. But if you have 4 or 5 things in the mix at the same time, it's a lot harder to be like, okay, what was the really bad idea in there? What was the good idea in there? And how do I keep evolving the system forward?
Are you old enough to remember when chromium picolinate was the answer to all questions?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
Okay. There's this they would come in drops or something. It was a supplement. I think it was called chromium picolinate, not poly, because that didn't work. And they had this it was my favorite study of ever. So they took these off-season football players and they gave them these drops. And 8 weeks later, they were all bigger, faster, stronger. Well, the thing they forgot to mention when they sold you the chromium is that these athletes had been untrained for 2 months postseason, and then did a combination of sprinting, Olympic lifting, and powerlifting, plus the 3 drops. And they got more muscular and leaner after the 8 weeks because of the drops, not because of sprinting, the Olympic lifting, the powerlifting.
Yeah. That reminds me a little bit of that, the Colorado experiment, which I know because of YouTube. It was Bromley who put out like all of the things they did to detrain Viator before that. And then, which is really amazing. Yeah. I mean, honestly, the whole thing was still amazing. Like
he lost a finger to tetanus. I mean, the guy was in the hospital. He's dying, lifts weights, and he puts on weights after he's recovered. Well, yeah, I mean, I tell you, after I got my liver parasite in the Middle East, I lost 40 pounds in 2 weeks. And weird thing, once that got taken care of and I could actually hold food down, I put on 40 pounds. Magic's by eating clean. Oh, I ate clean. Okay, there you go. Whatever phrase. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. It's
crazy.
It's amazing even to see like elite athletes I've worked with who have come back from like about a sickness. And when they walk in the weight room after that, they look like a shade of themselves. They're really skinny. And then literally after like 3 or 4 weeks, it's like someone flipped a light and they're like jacked again, and like just how fast you can, if you had it.
Sell them.
Yeah. Satellite cells.
I mean, you gotta quit being so you gotta start selling this program. 3 weeks, and don't put the caveats in there. Just sell it, man. So we had them lift 3 days a week, 5 sets of 5 with 4 exercises, 5 exercises. Wow. And the internet would blow up and oh, there we go. Or my other one last one is the fitness influencers who had a photo shoot like 6 years ago and they use those same pictures over and over and over. There's one I had to stop following. Uh, if you go through her Instagram feed, you'll see the same photos popping up, like it almost like A B C D E, A B C D E, and I mean, great, and I understand it. That you're trying to make a business, but you're making a business with a tiny bit of misinformation floating there.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of just a documentary around this was even before the world of influencers. It was just fitness magazines, and it was talking about basically people who are taking steroids and then selling supplements. And everybody knows this, I think, but it's just crazy to see. But yeah, I want to get to, one training exercise. I guess you could say it's of old. This fascinates me. And I use this when I train strength athletes like football linemen. Like I put this in the program. I don't put it in for high jumpers, but the power curl. So you've written about this. I just think it's so interesting because, the Olympic lifts for use in sports, like, what hair are we going to split this month or this year? But it's like the power curl is one that always stood out as very intriguing to me because it's, technique is kind of off the table compared to the learning curve of the Olympic lifts. And it's more, if you can power curl a lot, you are strong. I mean, Olympic lifting, you still are, but I mean, there's also the technical piece in that. But I'm curious where you got that from. I'm sure it goes way back. And thoughts on use and implementation there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, the first I'd ever heard of it, there was a discus thrower by the name of Al Order. He's kind of famous because he won 4 straight Olympic gold medals while working at Grumman, raising 2 daughters. He only trained, like 3 days a week, and and he called it the cheat curl. Now, make sure, just for the reference, everybody. So a power curl is a curl grip power clean. So you can do it from the high hang, which usually I would call that a cheat curl. From the floor or from the low hang, I would call it more of a power curl. So what I had heard about it, but for me, I didn't, since I knew how to clean, it was never a big deal. Later, I met Stefan Frohnholm, and Stefan, interesting guy, a left-handed shot pointer, hurt his wrist badly, could never throw the shot again, picked up the discus, couldn't clean, so he had to power curl. And he got up to some monstrous weights. And one of the things, and you're completely right. You see it in typical gyms all the time when people are trying to exhaust their biceps, but you can even take it to the next level and turn it into an athletic exercise. So it's curl grip. If you're doing it order style, you slide it down your thighs a little bit. You get a little bit of a hinge in there. And with that jump curl motion, you rack it up. There's a lot of caveats to the exercise. I would be careful if you were using certain anabolics because you could blow your bicep right off. It's funny, in my world, when someone pops a bicep or a pec, usually it's like, oh, okay, we know what the cause was. Okay, that's usually a real indicator. The value in a program is that if you, let's say, I don't know how much you've worked in the high school setting, even the junior college setting, I think I can get someone in 6 to 8 weeks to qualify for the Utah 3A state track meet. Someone to go from never seeing a discus to qualifying for the Utah State 3A track meet, okay, in the discus. 1A, 2A, 3A, probably actually 4A and 5A. All the A's, because the level, it's not as high as it was. If I need to get them a strength exercise, I don't have the time say, like, you're transferred to our school. You say, wow, I want to do that. If you show up in February, I'm going to make you pretty good. This isn't me doing this. This is what we do as track coaches, right? We can turn things around. The reason the power curl would be a good option for that athlete is because they're already learning the discus, the rules, the travel issues, the wind. You got to buy a pair of discus shoes. I've never heard of that before. I need a discus. I've never heard of that before. There's just, you can only throw so much more into the mix. So the power curl to me is like one of those great low entry lifts. It's easy on time, treasure, and talents to get the athlete to do it. It's not it's like teaching someone the goblet squat or the suitcase carry. I mean, it's pretty much here, do this, the plank, to me, it's a step above that family of exercises with ease of coaching. And you do get some benefits. Long term, of course, I think you're going to want to have the power curl, the traditional clean in your repertoire if you're a thrower, jumper, athlete of any kind, because those lifts will allow you to put the bar vertical. So sometimes, Joel, this is important. You need to have in your pocket those exercises that work in 6 weeks. If you're, when I talk to some powerlifters and I don't think there's a question that a powerlifting program might have an impact in 6 weeks, but I don't know if it would. But I think the power curl and maybe a reasonable ab exercise might be. That's all that athlete needs for that 6 to 8 weeks. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And then I'm working with Joel. He's been throwing 20 years, and we need something same comma but different. We need something same comma but different. You're just, been there, done that. Power curl's a great thing to add to the program. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's why I like it for the strength athletes, because I know they've been doing Olympic lifts all year. You've been doing them all year. So, hey, you're with me for 2 months. Let's power curl for 2 months. I'm going to give you something a little bit different there.
Yeah. And you're right. It's like, I like it. And I feel like I'm talking way too much, but like, I think the overhead squat and the power curl are probably two of the best discus throwing exercises there are. Power curl, I can teach you in seconds. The overhead squat, with its great value to a thrower, that's going to take that. You're going to have to layer mobility, flexibility, what I call the anaconda strength, that knitted, that your wrist has to be locked in. So does your ankle, from stem to stern. So sometimes in programs, you need to have overhead squats to help more adaptions, to assist the throws. But you also need like a low end ab curl or ab wheel or something like that. You need both of them. You need that whole family. Yeah.
Yeah. I like thinking about it. You mentioned this in one of your books. It's like basically you're either sprinting away from a predator, or, that's like the extensor chain, or you're hanging on a tree branch, like the flexion chain. And I think about the abs and the power curl. That's a lot more the flexion chain, and even Olympic lifts is more the extensor, like running away chain. And that's where it's almost like sandbags is something. If you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it. But I also was going to say, I know when you broke your wrist, and it's like, hold a sandbag and drag a sled. And I know for me, my same but different with all that has actually been a lot of sandbag cleans and sandbag work and squeezing work. And it's like, all of a sudden I'm getting like pec and bicep development that I was not intending on. That if I was, if high jump was my only event right now, it would not be great. But for being well-rounded and actually getting the fullness of muscle activation, I'm like, this is amazing. And I wouldn't have got that doing traditional cleans either, because I would have been still probably more generally externally rotating through it. So there's that nice balance then in there. For me, I'm getting it with more sandbags now, just the easiest way. And it's a lot of fun too. It's after cleaning for so many years. It's been great.
Well, and I got to tell you, the sandbag clean is an eye opener, especially if you're grabbing the bag for your grip strength. Talk about, okay, I want to crack the door to why grip strength is important. Grab a 40-pound sandbag like this, grab it, not the handles, but grab it and do some cleans. And there's that weird cramping you get right here. It's like, that's what I'm talking about. That in real time grip strength. Like, I love suitcase carries, farmer walks, but it hangs, but that's all you do in that exercise. You just, if you're just listening, folks, I'm making a fist and just holding on to something. But when you do sandbag, you have to move it through space and time.
Yeah.
Which means the pinkies have to do some thinking, and that's that changes the rules sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Even, you got me thinking. I test my grip a lot before training. Either that, like sometimes it's that speed tap test on the keyboard. A lot of times it's just, you get the gripper out, and gosh, you can get it for like $25 now. It's like actually absurd. And it'll tell you your score. But ever since I started training with sandbags, and then I do a lot of club bell work now as my main strength work. And I don't train grip, but my grips jumped about 25 pounds. And the Captain of Crush gripper has jumped a level up just from doing that. And if I would have only, I find it interesting because I feel like if all I did was train grip, I actually wouldn't get the grip increases that I do training sandbags. Like you said, it's like the pinky, it's everything. And you do it by accident and it's volume. So it's really cool.
One of the problems, and at least in my world, is that we often think that, if A leads to B and B leads to C, then, well, let's drop B and just go A to C. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes when you're trying to accomplish something, you still have to stick with all the steps in the system. And I think that's what you're kind of saying. It's like, if I'm trying to increase my grip strength because I read an article that said I should increase my grip strength, so all I do is test my grip strength all the time, I got bad news for you, because you could probably watch it drop for all kinds of reasons, like excessive whiskey use, crappy day, whatever. I'm always amazed how. So I think the tap test and I think the grip test are really good ways to test your nervous system and your recovery. I think they're, but what's happens is, and it happened with the tap test, people started to train the tap test.
Yeah.
They do it, get bored at work, on a phone call and hit the tap test. With grip, we're constantly taking that grip dynamometer.
Dynamometer, I think it's called.
Dynamometer. I skipped a syllable. And you're constantly testing it. And then the feedback you're getting is, oh my God, I must have a disease because look at the numbers dropping. And it's not, it's because you're over. That's interesting. When you have 400-meter runners, you never see them out sneaking out on the track and trying to sneak in an extra 400 meters. To I'll show you, coach. I'm gonna go run the 400 to see how fast I can go. Things I've never heard. Hey, can we do more flat out 400s today, coach? Sure. Gosh, yeah. We just want to see how fast we can get. Said no one ever. Okay,
yeah. It's that's okay.
The tap test to death.
Yeah. It gets obsessive because there's like that part of the athlete. It's like, I got to beat my score, but got to beat my score. And I was thinking about, it was a Mark Wildman video. He does like a lot of club bell stuff. And one of his videos is titled like Arms and Abs by Accident, but just as a side effect of swinging clubs. Like you didn't mean to get those arm or abdominal gains. It just happened because you did the thing. And to me, that's a huge interest of mine because it fits with like the judgment loops. Like, like if you fail a set, there's that judgment like, oh, I failed at XYZ. And of course the systemic piece, but then like even the grip test, like every day I'm just hammering the grip test. It's test and it's an expression of strength. It's a judgment on the expression of strength versus actually just training it and just doing the thing day in and day out and not judging it. And occasionally you do, like, I think you have like every 2 weeks you do a sort of max like type thing. It's kind of like, what's that sweet spot of just doing it and judging the actual result?
See, in the fat loss world, they have this great phrase called the whoosh. And the whoosh, you see it very much in the Atkins people. When you first do Atkins, when you first do low carb, you get rewarded instantly. You really do have a great 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then there's this flat line. And if you hang in there long enough, literally out of nowhere, one day you lose 10 pounds or more. Well, there's reasons for that. Well, in our world, in strength, if you show up, you stay at, you don't miss reps, you take care of business, you let the ebbs and flows of life happen. What happens sometimes, it just shoots the roof. I mean, I think I talk about this story in my book. I told my athletes this the other day about improvement for throwing, how you have to be careful, because I try to get my throwers to think, so here's your personal record on a perfect day, perfect wind. Here's your throw in a snowstorm with a tailwind. That's your range or your bumpers. The mistake we make is that we're always focusing on the top one, and I try to nudge this one up more. And I tell them a story about when 76 Olympics. This will probably indicate how old I am. My hero, Lee James, got the silver medal. And I was a huge Lee James fan. My coach, Dick Notmeyer, and my other coach, Jim Schmitz, were up at Montreal for the, obviously the Olympics. So my dad drove me to the sports palace. I'll make the story quick. We used pounds at my gym. So my personal record in the clean and jerk was 270. I'm using pounds. Well, this was a kilo gym, so I did 271 new personal record. My dad said that looked good. I went to 282 new personal record. I went to 292 new personal record. Danny Curriell shows up and says, "Are you doing clean pulls?" I go, "No, I'm clean and jerking." And he goes, "No way." So I put 303 on the bar and I clean and jerked 300 pounds for the first time. Showed up at the gym with a 270 PR, walked out of the gym with a 303 PR. As an athlete, what was my thought? Well, of course, next week I'll do 314, the week after 345, the week after 336, 352, and I'll be over 400 by the end of, August. In reality, it was a beep. And of course, I never, I stayed at that range. I stayed at that 295, 303 range for a couple of weeks. And after that, I took off. But I had a whoosh effect. Weight loss is down and strength is up. And how did I do it? Well, Dick Notmeyer and Jim Schmitz were at the Olympics. My hero got the silver medal. And also the first time in a couple of months, I hadn't lifted weights 5 days a week. I came in on Saturday completely healthy, completely refreshed, kind of hungry to have my hand on the bar. You can't repeat that. You can't. And this is the hardest thing about performance is, I'm sure you deal with this with your athletes. They always want to go back. So you're at the Nationals, 72,000 people clapping their hands, and it was 73.2 degrees Fahrenheit. It was dry. You felt good. You had a delightful bowel movement that morning. You slept 12 hours. You felt great, and then you jump, and now you're angry 6 months later in a November training session that you're not hitting those heights, distances, or whatever. Can you see any difference in those two scenarios? Athlete? No. Everybody else on the planet? How do you miss that?
Yeah.
How do you not? Because that's George Sheehan in his run in one of his books, Dr. Sheehan on running, I think it is. He talks about how athletes live in the pure present. We have no past, we have no future. They're like, and he equates poets, artists, children, and the elderly. They all live in the pure present. There's no yesterday and there's no tomorrow. And I don't know. I just think that's the hardest thing about our field is working with people who live literally in the pure present. What have you done for me lately? Just watching sports fans this time of year attack quarterbacks just make me laugh. Or, if your team loses a game, you want to fire the coach because what have you done for me lately? But okay, I'm going on too much.
Yeah.
Look at all your.
Well, something you said actually it struck a chord with me, and I know this is something you've written this exact thing or something very close to it. But there was an interview with a track athlete. I think it was at the University of Oregon. And she was saying, my coach said, a third of your workouts are going to be great, a third are going to be average, a third are going to be poor. And I mean, to me, I guess I think about in like just judgment and feedback loops. If you're always in this place where, I have to perfectly time the super compensation curve every single time. I remember there was a book that came out in the early. I'll send this to you if you haven't read, just so you could get a kick out of it. I think you'd get a good. It is thought provoking, but it's like how to time. It's like DB Hammer, the ultimate sports training book. And it's like, all right, if you drop off your lift this much, you're going to be up this much in this many days. And then you figure that out and you keep doing it. And it's just like, well, that's not real life. Like you might be able to do a few workouts for sure, but it's at some point you're going to miss that where you're supposed to be. And then you're going to be like, oh, what do I do now? And it's like, it makes it so much more human to just live with the nonlinearity of it all. And like, yeah, some of my workouts are going to be bad, but like you said, how can I raise the floor? Like those third of the workouts that aren't good, what can I do to make that the best workout I can? Like, and just enjoy it, live in the moment for this third that it's not great. You know what? My nervous system, my tap test sucks and I don't have the output, but what am I going to do? And honestly, there's things I feel like can get it back through just like, even just playing a game beforehand, stuff like that can sometimes, help those things along. So yeah, it's just an interesting.
Literally I would plan. Oh, sorry. I mean,
Oh yeah, no, I'm done. Yeah, I'm good.
So mine is 5. It's the rule of 5. One workout a week. If you're doing 5 workouts, one's going to suck. 3 are going to I call them punch the clock.
Yeah.
Wile E. Coyote and the sheepdog, he shows up every day and they punch the clock to go to work. And I honestly think those days, well, let's go back. I like that 5 sets of 5 with 5 exercises. If you add 3 of those 5 by 5 by 5 workouts a week, 3 of them for 52 weeks, and every single one of them is, you're going to be profoundly changed in 52 weeks. Profoundly. And then the 5th workout of the week is the one you kind of brag about. And here's the thing. If you do what, like in my case, 100, I work out about 5 times, 200, and I work out 260 times a year. Okay. So let's just drop that to 200 because I'm not good at math. No, we'll drop that to 100 because I'm not good at math. Okay. That means I don't have 20 good workouts a year. Of those 20 workouts a year, about 4 of them are me like, yeah, look who I am. If you have 1,000 workouts, there's going to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 that I will post on social media. And you don't hear about the workouts that I don't post. I mean, they're like the other 2 weeks ago, we had a bodybuilder here named John Call, and he did a nice job filming my workout. And the workout he's filming, I'm just doing a punch the clock workout. And there'll be little comments in the bottom, and they say, well, he doesn't have good mobility. Yeah, okay, you're right. I'm a 67-year-old Olympic lifter with double total hip replacements and surgeries on every joint in my body except for my ankles. Yeah, weirdly, I'm not as flexible as, a North Korean lightweight female Olympic lifter. I know. It's my fault, and I'm sure if I did some more stretching, I would be just like her. Well, the problem is, besides DNA and her youth, we're exactly the same. So sometimes when I'm doing the punch the clock workouts, I mean, I'm just like, why do I do this? But what I know from my career is those, again, going back to Looney Tunes, those dun 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 dun, those workouts that are you just get in, you do your sets and reps, you walk out the door, you salute yourself for that effort. I actually think those are the ones that make champions. And I'll add one other. The crappy days are the ones that make champions. Those ones where you just can't get out of your own way, but you learn one lesson, you nudge one quality north, maybe it's not the best day for your squat, but for some reason you were able to lubricate your shoulder a little bit. Oh, and you got a little, to me, those sneaking 1/5 kind of workouts are the ones that really do put you up on the top of the ladder, as we'd say in Europe. Yeah.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the Athletic Development Games educational program. This program includes a video library of fun and engaging games aimed at kids ages 4 to 10 years old. In the program, you'll find activities for speed, coordination, jumping, and more, with new videos added each month. The games are fun, engaging, and they also invoke the imagination. It's given me great ideas already for my youth sports teams, as well as plenty of games to play with my own children. To sign up for the course, you can head to athleticdevelopmentgames.com/app, and you can use the coupon code JUSTFLY, that's JUSTFLY with all caps, at checkout for an exclusive 50% off. Yeah, I agree. I think it's so, and I've been there so many times on that good day, that one good day of the week where you feel like this is how it's always going to be. You're living in the moment, you're enjoying the output your body has, and you're framing this up like, and again, I do think there is something about, I think athletes play little tricks on themselves all the time. Probably a lot of it is a good thing sometimes, but like, you're framing this up, well, this next time I'm going to be here. And I think there is some good in that, but it's also like Liz Gleedle, javelin thrower, who was on, said she's talked a lot about viewing things as a gift. And I think if you view that day as a gift, more so than like, oh, of course I'm going to, I mean, again, it's good to level up, to have that confidence, that new framework. But there's also a gift to that day because, hey, this is the day your nervous system is hot. Like this is exciting. What can we do with this today? But then realize I think maybe for me, I'm just speaking personally here, is knowing, and this is anything in life, you're not going to always feel like this. You're going to have that day where you don't feel good is coming because you're feeling good now. And then how are you going to work on that day where it's not so good? What are you going to do? Like how are you going to frame up your training that day? And that, like you said, raising the floor, like all those, we talk only about the ceiling, and I don't think we spend much time on the floor.
So every Saturday at my home here, I have a group of people. I'm going to say they're my friends, but honestly, it's an intentional community. And we have a financial meeting. We have a financial group called Bumpers. And one of the things all of us discover in our group is that it's much in certain areas. I think with body weight, I think with income, there's some others too. And by the way, in the throws and jumps, it works well too. So you get yourself in this idea. Rolling out just ties right out into this for those who want to look up a word. But the idea is that we sit and we talk, and it's like, if I have a good month and I shoot through for some new book came out, my number, let's say the number is 100, it doesn't matter. So my top number is 100, but I go to 160. I cannot think that is now my typical month for income. What I do with that extra 60, I said 100, 160. That extra 60, I'll put into a 6-month fund. I'll put that a rainy day fund, all that, because my bumpers are now. If it gets below my bottom number, then I panic. Then I call up Walmart and I get my blue vest on and I start welcoming people at the door or whatever. Okay, but as long as I'm within those bumpers, financially, body weight, and some other things, I'm doing okay. And it does actually help early season, I think, as a coach. So, okay, what I want you to do today, Joel, is I want you to throw the shot. We want you, we're 14 meters, but your PR is 18, but I want you between 14 and 18. And you look at me like, don't you know who I am? And you drop a 15 or 16 out there and you're like, yeah, because that's where you are right now. And instead of being a failure because you didn't break your personal record, we're mentally pointing, down the pipe here to this other event that's coming up that's far more important than, I don't know, the Wildcat Invitational indoor meet with, 300 middle school kids and running around and collegiate athletes trying to throw safely. Yeah. As happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love how I think the thing is, and you talk about this a lot, like you see it in training, you see it elsewhere in life. And the more you can see it elsewhere and like there's interconnections between all those things, the more it sticks too. And the more like meaningful it is and the more it helps everything along. The reason we all do this to begin with. So I always love those connections.
I would even reach out and say, anybody who's in a relationship probably has a story about how they met the person. In fact, one of my favorite questions is, how did you two meet? And never is it planned. Never, ever, ever have I ever. Now, there are other traditions on the planet that actually do plan weddings and marriages, but here, or at least in and so what I use with my athletes is I use that story. So, when you meet somebody and you get into a relationship, there's a whole bunch going on there, and very little of it is planned. It just, all these things come together. And I actually see high performance as the same thing. You can't always, I used to know Mike Powell really well. I haven't seen him in a long time, but when you talk to Mike Powell about, his world record in the long jump, there's a story behind it. There is a huge story behind it. And a lot of things had to happen. Sometimes it's just, John Powell, blessed memory, when he broke the world record, he was a police officer and there was a bachelor party the night before. And he vomited in a bunch of rose bushes when he got to the event because he was hung over. He felt terrible. And guess what? First thing he said to himself, if I can just throw one, I think he said 190, it might've been 180. That's good enough for today. Well, when he's warming up, what he feels like is a 180 throw is going 205. What he felt like would be a 190 throw is going 210.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, the world record happens. And interesting, hungover throws is one of the most hangovers and big throws is more common than you would think.
Interesting.
Because you have this great built-in excuse to not throw well.
Yeah, I think that's worth its own like article series or book almost, is expectations. I think the worst always, and everyone who's trained seriously sees this all the time, is you go into a workout, you have an expectation. I need to get this PR. If that drive is good, that drive is important. If we did without it, we wouldn't do anything. But it's like, but then the expectation, you don't hit it. The judgment comes in, trusting the system and the process and this and that and the other thing. And yeah, I mean, you want to organize training well. You don't just want to throw anything on the paper. But at the same time, you also need to realize that we're human and this isn't a completely linear thing. And it's how you manage the day and how you work with your expectations on the day.
Exactly. And I'm always amazed when the people will, I mean, Dave Tate's great. He's a powerlifting coach. If you send him a program where he sees 90 or 95% in the first 6 months, he throws it away. And like he told me, at the time, he had 13 guys bench pressing 800. Now, next time you get a chance, gentle listener, just put 720. That's 90% of 800. Put 720 on the bar and just bench press it for a couple of reps, and you'll get a sense of how heavy it is. And that, you'll look at these, you'll look at these people at these programs with percents and all these things, and they're guiding you to this magical land of Oz, the Emerald City. And it's like, dude, okay, how are you going to go? So you're supposed to clean and jerk 100 today, and in 3 months you're going to clean and jerk 400 because look at the numbers. It works. Yeah, it might work numbers wise, but it ain't going to work it's not going to work in the gym. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. My own high jump personal best actually came the only time I ever made 7 feet was, this is just how my mind worked when I was 21 too. Like I think the meet was on Friday and I did this big depth jump workout on Tuesday. And in my mind, I always needed 4 days to recover from that depth jump workout. It was like, because I read a book one day, it's like, 2 days, you're going to just be totally spent. And honestly, it usually was. And then day 3, you're coming back, and day 4, you're super compensated. And I'm like, well, I guess 6 is the best I'm going to do this day. And, it's just, to me, it is, but you mentioned kind of having, I think there's like negatives and then benefits of that pure in the moment brain. But I think one of the best benefits is you don't have expectations, like when you're purely in the moment, it's just like it all is. And it's like so beautiful. So it's like there's that piece that is so essential. But then, of course, too, if you're purely in the moment and you have maybe if you have expectations, you're not purely in the moment. I don't know. It's an interesting to talk through these things for sure.
Yeah. And then I always go back to Dick Fosbury, who didn't do any plyos and did there's a great article in 1971 Track and Field. It's the one I think it's called, the cover of it's called Everything's Happening in Pocatello with the indoor track. And he talked about how bored he was with training. He was doing, all I do is some leg presses and that's about it. He jumped 7'4". And so sometimes you have to sit back and say, we got all these great ideas and things. And then this guy jumped 7'4", doing practically nothing. Okay. And I've been around people who are going to beat me in the discus, even if they didn't lift the weights. They're just better.
Yeah.
Better.
I was thinking about that. Would a cheetah go faster if you put like a sled on it somehow? Or could you do that? I don't know. Probably, maybe. But I don't know if it'd help it. It's already a cheetah, It's interesting to think about that. Dan, I'm trying to think about, okay, so I wanted to ask you about a mainline question was just, and you've talked about this, like how much has strength and conditioning improved since the 80s? You've seen all the decades. You have all the old books. I need to fill up my shelf with more track and field Omni-Books and track and field magazines from back in the day. I think we all do. But And unfortunately, we don't have more than 15 minutes to go through this. So, whatever you want in this time we have left, I'd be curious. Just take on through the decades. Where was the peak, and how did we get to where we are now? And how, in 15 minutes, what's the path forward in terms of how you've seen it?
One of the best things. So I was lucky because I was a track and field athlete before the aerobics boom of Jane Fonda et al., before the bodybuilder boom of Arnold. So I was lucky. So when I first started lifting weights, I was told by people, and I've said this candidly, and I'm about to say something the truth. So I'm just telling you what people told me. Weightlifting is going to make me muscle bound, and weightlifting is going to turn me into a homosexual. I was told both of those things. Okay. And that was very common when I was young to tell people. So it was great because nobody lifted weights. So you got a chance to actually learn this art without all the nonsense. You didn't have some fitness influencer, who basically looks like Barbie with all the plastic surgery, telling people that lunges and I don't know, cayenne pepper are the answer to all questions. Okay, whatever the hell it is this week. Okay, so my early influencers were Strength and Health, J.K. Doherty, even before the Omni-Book, because I had his movies on paper. In fact, I still have I have his throws book in there, the movies on paper throws book. So I was lucky because uh, there was a barbell and it was almost universally on the ground, and it had to be moved into a position to do the exercise. So every set that you did with any exercise involved a deadlift of some kind or a clean of some kind. So when I look back what we're doing in the 60s, and remember, look at the numbers in the 1960s. Now, there's no question anabolics had shown up, but most of the people who are competing were probably lifting 2 to 3 times a week, but everybody was lifting. And when they lifted, there was generally this group of exercises they would do. It was the clean and press, everybody clean and pressed. Some people snatched or snatch variations. And then people would use their legs a little bit for a push jerky, ballistic overhead movement. And then from there, they would invent exercises that they thought would help their sport. Bill Nieder famously with the Nieder press where you the horizontal push jerk. Yeah. The Russian hockey deadlift, the Jefferson this, the Jefferson that, I don't know who Jefferson is, but there's 3 different exercises named after for good for him, So I guess he's very, very good at what he does. I don't know why they're called Jefferson deadlifts, Jefferson squats, and Jefferson curls. But you would play around, and when you go to a meet, you would talk to a guy, and the guy would say, well, here's what we're doing. We're putting boxes, and we're sitting down to the box and then rocking up. Here's what we're doing. We're doing inclines instead of bench press. Oh my God, So that's how you improved. And this is going to sound horrible, but that group think, that shared knowledge, that elite performers talking to up and coming performers, that shared conversation, that was strength and conditioning. And I think it's better than what we have now. In the 70s, of course, Arnold comes out, the educational bodybuilder, pumping iron comes out. And that's when Frankenstein's monster training shows up. Arm day, leg day. And I'm going to tell you, any of you who are athletes, if you're still thinking that a day of the week you should be doing this exercise, a day of the week you should be doing that exercise, you're not. You might look good, but you might not perform good. Okay. In the 80s, it's our first attempts to make this organized, and in Strength and Health magazines, the NSCA guys start answering questions. And I think this is when we actually start getting into trouble because sports science always has a problem. We study stoned 19-year-old freshmen at universities to find out that if you take an untrained athlete and you have them lift weights, after 8 weeks, they lift more weights. Okay. To me, you can say that's science, but to me, that's more like common sense. By the way, in defense of common sense, in theology, it's the highest form of proof. Common sense. being reasonable and common sense are the highest logical tools I think a coach can have. Common sense and being reasonable. My knock is we let common sense go out of the way. I'm always amazed when people do these studies, the meta studies, and they find out that no matter what you study, if you people lift weights, it gets stronger. Well, yes, of course. The studies didn't need to be done. The meta study didn't need to be done because it's common sense. So I feel like in the 80s, we started sliding away from common sense. Plyometrics have been around for a long time. Once the two books, Don Chu's book on plyometrics and then the Maryland coach book on plyos came out. Yes's material started to come out, Soviet sport review. And of course, and I've talked to the people so John Powell is featured in one of the Soviet sports reviews. And John used to think it was an absolute joke because the Soviets had him benching 550. He goes, okay. He goes, I was a good bencher. I benched in the mid 300s. And it's honest bench. They just added 200 pounds to it because they want to sell the article.
Yes.
and so you just go through all this stuff and listen, I'm a huge believer in science. Okay. I really do. And the thing about science that's important is that we always have to be able to when you tell me I'm wrong about something, and here is the research, I have a chance to say, okay, but, and then if it's overwhelming, then we move in a different direction. I never felt like we gave enough respect to what we were doing in the 40s with Otis Chandler, world record holding shot putter, later LA Times publisher. The 50s with Perry O'Brien adding the mental side of training. The 60s with the great influx of the Olympic lifts, the power lifts into the throws and other events. And in the 70s, I think we just let things, and then I'm going to throw in one other thing, is the myth of the Eastern European athlete. Okay. There's no question. A very famous throws coach that most people bow down and genuflect to gave a workshop and asked if there was going to be Americans at it because he has an American in the audience workshop and no Americans in the audience workshop. And he said clearly he knows when one of his throwers was on drugs because he expected in one of the throwing events, I'm going to hold it back, that the second you start on anabolics, you improve almost instantly 10 meters. 10 meters. 10. For those of you who know how far that is in the throws, it's night and day. I had a competitor email me a while ago. I guess he found Jesus. I didn't know Jesus had gotten lost, but and he wanted to apologize because he beat me at this competition because he had started using anabolics and he had gone from being a mediocre thrower to winning this thing. And my thought was, well, why don't you reach out to the organization and tell them and, retroactively let me win. But there's this, sorry, that was an inappropriate story, but it's a good one. It's true. But my point is this Eastern European, they do everything right. They ignored the fact drugs, and state sponsorship, which is huge. If you're on drugs and you're getting fed 3 or 4 meals a day, there's you've got full-time coaches and masseuses. You've got indoor throwing facilities, jumping facilities. There's you sleep 9 hours a night and you take a 3-hour nap like the Cuban athletes were doing there for a while. You're going to improve. And it's not just the fact that, those first biomechanical studies, the 76 Olympics, they did a biomechanical study of the shot put, which proved that the guy who took second won. I think I've told you that before in this. Yeah. I always find that just fascinating, No, he didn't. He lost. I don't care what the dots on the graph said. Okay. Brian Oldfield complained about the original studies because they didn't have Z in it. They were studying just X and Y. Well, what makes the throwing events go far is that, we're not stick figures.
Yeah, augmentation.
And Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So my point is, we went down a bunch of rabbit holes, and I still think we're digging our way back up. I still think, Joel, if you just had a barbell, you asked me to think about the Werner Gunther videos. And when I was at the Olympic Training Center in 91, they showed us those in raw. They showed us those raw. That's when he was still throwing.
Yeah.
And the guy who filmed him shared them, and we weren't ever allowed to share them with anybody, but they're online now. The same weekend, they showed us a video of a Soviet hammer thrower. At the time, they were still Soviets. And it was a true video. And he had a path outside of his farmhouse. He had a barbell, and the path was his platform, and he dropped the barbell on the grass on the side of the path. And he would go out of his farmhouse and do power snatches for a while, and then go back in his farmhouse where he had a really crappy high jump pit, and he had really crappy high jump standards. And this is the first time I'd ever seen like a bungee cord. That was the first. This is 91. Remember, now it's pretty common to have like a stretchy band, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then he would do his, that drill. The jumpers, you guys do that
Yeah,
drill.
just standing back over, like vertical back
standing
over.
back over.
Yeah.
And then he'd put a box up and do jumps, and then he'd do high jumps. That's the video that impressed me more than Gunther's. Because to me, so that guy, all you got to do with that guy is put him into, he high jumps 7-1, makes that standard to go to the camp. At the camp, they add this ingredient and that ingredient, 3 meals a day. It's not leaking. He's not getting rained on every time he jumps. And then he jumps up to 7-4, 7-5. Sorry for using feet, but that's easier for me with high jump. All of a sudden, everyone's saying, well, it's because of what he did. It was that base that we miss. I'll talk to, parents would email me about these programs for their 6th grade daughter.
Yeah.
And it is more complex than anything I've ever done in my career.
Yeah. It's maybe.
That was a rant. I'll bring it in. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just a couple of minutes left to kind of, there's so much good stuff in there to me, and I just finished an email talking about the hero's journey. I think I did one with the hero's journey a couple of years back, but there's something about 80s training movies that, some are a little, like cheesy, you could say, but there's something that lights a fire in you, and it's that hero's journey. It's making do with less. And there's that stage of you against the world a little bit, and there's all these stages we go through, but we've kind of lost that purity of making do with the simple thing in your backyard because it's all you have. And even when I was growing up, my dad made a high jump pit out of foam that was probably extremely dangerous that I could practice on in the backyard. And I jumped on it all the time. And there was this spot I'm going to land on right here. And then you go do some dunks after. And I wouldn't trade that for the world, and even thinking about too, I was thinking about, you said how people used to lift weights. One thing I was thinking about was the Steinborn squat. Like that was the one, right? Where he's like, you start it on the side, you start the barbell vertical.
The bar up, you tilt it up.
Yeah. And you have to lean. Anyone who's watched this, YouTube Steinborn squat, but like you have to side bend the squat. And I was just thinking too, it's just funny because I do a lot of biomechanics shows. We talk about being overly compressed because you just like back squat because you have an apparatus to get into a back squat. It's like, well, hey, we'll balance it out with a side bend. If you're a wide rib cage, you kind of need that sideways stimulus. It's just kind of funny how things, I think it's just interesting how things, or sandbags, like squeezing, like things that are really simple, and how can I manipulate this? And it's like there's that sweet spot between I don't have anything, maybe, and then like where you have everything. And maybe that in a way is, that's just how I take it, is never get too far from that where you started. Even Rocky's got to go back and train in the Siberia every now and then. You always have to. Otherwise you forget about it.
Rocky 4 is a great, interesting. I've had people say, well, actually it's the opposite is true. The Russians were training in crappy facilities, but you're right. I remember one time a competitor came here to Utah and he saw where I trained, and it was interesting because he went, okay, basically he figured out why I could come from behind so much, and why, because when you're training, in a snowstorm in a garage with the snow blowing in, doing front squats or snatches, when I go to the nationals, I've got a bigger buffer
Mm.
I haven't had. I got. I trained for the nationals one time in Olympic lifting with a bar that didn't rotate, and it actually hurt me because those
Yeah.
those bars at the national, they
Oh
spin
yeah.
so fast, and I had to kind of in the warm up room kind of, okay, holy cow, these things are flying. And it was like, and I had to kind of rethink. My point is there's great value in the idea of, okay, for 3 months with this program, we just have bars on the ground, no racks,
Mm.
no boxes, no gear. Figure it out. Figure it out. Yeah, love it. I
Yeah.
get fired up. Sorry.
I know I am too. I love it. Like, it just ideas, just how to make that initial base of training to put that onto it. Because then common sense, of course, and intuition rise, and that richness in accumulation. It's like my accumulation phase, we had to do this. So I love it.
But
Sure.
one of the things a lot of athletes start to do is they turn off, because if I give you everything, then I'm your wizard. I'm your Gandalf, your Merlin. I'm your Moses. I'm your prophet. I'm the answer to all your questions. But what makes an athlete great is when they go, what made Dick Fosbury great in the high jump? What made him great? Well, he thought for himself, to the point that his coach at Oregon State, Frank Morris, did everything he could to stop Fosbury from jumping that way. And then later, of course, sold VHSs on how he coached him up, which I still think is hilarious. LJ Sylvester lost to his brother at a track meet, and it pissed him off. So on the weekend, he went out and figured out a wide leg technique and added 20 feet to his throw. And Coach Mon said, well, let's work on this. What makes athletes great is when they fold their arms in frustration and say, I've got to figure out a way to win. The modern American football offenses are based, I think, on the Tiger Ellison's book, Run and Shoot. They lost a game big time, and he had one of his athletes contemplate suicide. When he heard about it, he said, I can't be part of this. I've got to make football fun again. And that's when this idea of you go with or not in the passing game, and he decided to make things fun again. It took one of his athletes contemplating suicide to change American football completely. LJ loses to his brother. Dick is struggling with this technique that doesn't work for him. Those are three great stories, right? Well, where are the rest of these stories? Well, where are they? I'll tell you one thing. I understand they're bringing the somersault long jump back.
Are they? Really?
Yeah. I guess it's going to be allowed in college. But there's the cartwheel shot put technique.
Yeah.
Banned. The somersault long jump, banned. The rotational javelin throw, banned for good reasons. It's dangerous.
I could see that one. Yeah.
I'm okay with that one. Yeah.
That one's fine.
Yeah. But my point, in fact, they used to put soap on their hands so they couldn't even hold on to it, so slide out. When track and field started banning innovation, I do think, I wouldn't say killed the sport, but I would say it. Why if we're trying to reach the tip of human potential, which I think after 100 years of the modern Olympics, we're starting to close in on. I mean, let's be honest. Jesse Owens with the track that they ran out the last Olympics, he'd have been close. Jesse Owens, he'd have been close. Bob Beamon, probably would have won. Men's discus. Now I don't know what the hell happened there. I don't know how that. I mean, you throw 69 meters and you barely get a bronze. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Indoor, but we're probably at the high point of human potential in some of the events. I would say in the long jump, I would say almost high jump. You got the same problem in the high jump, right? It's stalled out for a long time.
Yeah.
How many years has that record been from the Cuban?
I think 93 was Soto. And then, Barshim was close. He jumped 8 feet. The only second guy over 8 feet. But who knows, it's almost like you have a generational jumper, and it's been a while, basically.
Okay. So 93, I mean, if you were born in 93, would you be able to vote? Yeah.
Mhm.
That's a lot.
Mhm.
My daughters were 90 and 92, so that's a while ago. And I'm a grandfather, so that'll tell you what can happen in that time. Yeah, that's a lot of water on the bridge. I think one of the things I think the athlete has to tell us how to throw farther. That's why I'm such a big fan of Percy Cerruti, the Australian coach. In his book Training with Cerruti, he talks about like 5 and 6 turn hammer throwing and all these other things. I tried the double turn discus throw. It didn't work. But you see the new slide technique that Ryan Krauser's using. The athlete is
Yeah.
trying to figure out a way to do things. But if I just stand there with my arms folded and say, "Do you do this?"
Yes.
We look.
I totally agree. It's funny, even just with Krauser too, like the best in the world is still innovating his technique, still finding a way. It's still like a story. It's like if they made a documentary or you made your own documentary about your training, would it be, what kind of story would it be? I just think there's something that's so powerful. That's so cool. I hadn't even thought about that with Krauser, still reinventing, still finding, or Ash Neaton and like the shuffle, instead of the normal shot put glide, he does the decathlon step, throws a different step in there and figures it out that way. And I'm sure Harry Marr, I don't know how that exactly came about, but it's just super cool. I love those stories. So,
Brian Oldfield about it. Brian Oldfield says he invented it. He called it the Chicago Shuffle.
Yeah.
What was funny is that's how Utah State University's Glenn Passy threw in the early 1960s.
Yeah.
So, and the rotation was experimented with by the Occidental throwers in Southern California. One of them threw in the Nationals with the rotation long before the Soviet guy invented it, and long before Brian. I'm just saying, my point being, they're out there. There are people out there trying to tweak ways to defeat you and me.
Yeah.
And our job is to figure out ways to stay ahead of them. Yeah. And I think we forget that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so cool to think this thing we walk around the earth in is capable of so many techniques. I think we forget that sometimes. It's just so cool to think about. So, hey, Dan, I know you got to go. Amazing talking to you. Thanks for hopping on the conversation. Appreciate it today.
I always feel like you and I get along real well. Anytime you want, or just even if you want to chat, I mean, I'm here for you. I love what you do, Joel, and you're one of the few. I don't know what you call what you do. You do such a good job with those. I don't know, newsletters or whatever those things you come out with. They're so good, and I just want to let you know, as a 67-year-old athlete who's been coaching since 1979. I actually learned things from you, and I really appreciate it. And I look forward to when they come out. That's my young friend. That's high praise. Okay.
So, and absolutely. I so appreciate that. Means the world to me coming from you, Dan. So I totally appreciate that. I love putting those together. Sometimes a little bit, I feel like my hairline recedes a little bit just putting a few of them together, but I love it. So thank you so much. That means a lot to me, and I appreciate the conversation.
I'm always here for you. If I could be of service, let me know. Do me a favor, make sure you leave some links and things. Anyone wants my junk, but you do great.
Absolutely, will do. All right, thank you again, Dan. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. You can learn more about what Dan's been up to by heading to the show notes of this episode on justflysports.com. Looking forward to seeing you back next week. Have a good one.